The title of this module is Analyzing the Appeal of Harry Potter. Obviously, J.K. Rowling, the first billionaire author. And I can tell you that her first two books took off like wildfire long before there were movies. I know I've had lots of students who said, I don't want to read Harry Potter. Everybody's reading it. It's just a fad. You don't get to $1 billion sales on a fad. I understand if, what's popular for other people isn't popular for you. But there's something there that has made it so pleasurable or even fulfilling for so many people. The other thing different is, how many age ranges it appeals to. I remember at some of the midnight release parties, hearing on the radio, there's 10-year-olds lining up. They want to read this book. Well, most of the people I knew that were lining up were closer to 50, including me. Okay, so these books appeal to people across different ages. And as many of you already know, the later books are much more complex and darker and more appropriate for older readers than the first couple of books. There's some pretty dark things in the first couple of books, too. I mean, that second movie, I wouldn't take a child under 10 to that. But anyway, so you've just come off the fairy tales, so this will probably seem like light reading compared to some of the gruesomeness and heaviness in the fairy tales. So the title of the model is What's the Appeal? So your personal reaction, what you like and don't like, is important, but then analyze what it is about that you enjoy. What is it about the characters or Harry Potter's feelings? Or I'm going to give you an example from page 66, where we get his list of school supplies. Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry. Uniform. First-year students will require 1, 3 sets of plain work robes, black. 2, 1 plain pointed hat, black, for day wear. 3, 1 pair of protective gloves, dragon hide or similar. What is going on in this list of school supplies that makes it so fun and delightful for so many people? So ask yourself these questions, either in your post or when you're responding to other people's posts. And of course, there may be some things you don't like. There's been a lot of criticism of J.K. Rowling. Some people say she's not a good writer, that her style is bad. I don't see it myself, but you may run us. There are some cliches in here. For example, why does she have to make the bad guy fat? I mean, does that bother you? Yes. Dudley, is it stereotyping? Or, like many of the fairy tales, does it somehow represent something about his character? Now, the first thing I'm asking you to get into in this first discussion is the characters and what specific aspects mean. And I don't want to steal things that you were going to say, although I may do that a little bit, but I want to give you some examples. I mentioned in the instructions the fact that Mr. Dursley has his desk faced away from the window. What might that represent about his character? When Dumbledore first appears on the street, we get a description of him, and one thing that is told to us is that his nose looks as if it had been broken at least twice. What does that tell us about Dumbledore's character? Right there. Now, if you've read the whole series, you find out in book 7 how it got broken. But even if you haven't read the series or don't read past book 1, what does that tell you about the type of person Dumbledore is? And I'll just say one thing, he's known pain. He hasn't had a perfect hunky-dory life, and maybe he's a fighter if his nose has been broke, or maybe he's clumsy, I don't know, but somehow he got his nose broken and he has experienced pain. So that's one thing. The other thing I like to notice about Dumbledore is it says his beard was long enough to be tucked inside his belt. Now, I've had students say, well, she doesn't say it was in his belt, just that it was long enough. But I kind of think it probably was tucked in his belt. If you've seen the movies, you noticed that the first Dumbledore always had his beard hanging out straight down to the floor, and it was very impressive and constantly reminded us how old and wise and dignified he was. The second Dumbledore, Michael Gambon, had a little rubber band tied around his beard, which looked pretty dorky, so he wasn't into impressing people with his long beard. It was there, but it was a little rubber band. My theory about tucking it into his belt, he didn't want to impress people with it. He wanted it out of his way. It was there, but he's very pragmatic about it. Another thing that kind of ties into that I think ties into a big theme of the book that you'll see lots of other evidence about that you can post. On page 9, it says, Albus Dumbledore didn't seem to realize he had just arrived in a street where everything from his name to his boots was unwelcome. Dumbledore didn't care, or it wasn't affected by what other people thought of him. Now, before that, we had the whole pages about Mr. Dursley and how much he would have hated and despised and feared someone like Dumbledore. Dumbledore doesn't let that affect him. And that reminds me of Dickon, right? Remember how they said, he'd be the same person whether he was in the bottom of a mine or in a rich person's parlor? That boy is just fine, he is, they said. So there's something about being yourself, having that integrity, and not being swayed by other people's opinions. So what's going on with the Dursleys? What do they care about? There's a lot of things they care about that I'll just wait for you to post about. But one thing I think is real important, the bottom of the first page and on page 4 is the word fear. The Dursleys care what other people think about them, and they are afraid of having their secrets exposed or having their boat rocked. Fear. So you might think about, what does fear do to people? Or how do the Dursleys act? And your experience, do people who behave like that, are they motivated by fear? It's a big, important theme in the book. This thing's getting long. I'm going to